Waffles or French toast, but now there's big
I did not have a lot of time this week, so we got about 11 slides total. But we'll talk amongst ourselves as well, because a lot of you guys are very experienced reefers, been in the hobby for a long time. Ashcan can't shut up, so
that's when you tell me to come down. So I mean, what
so,
I skip one every time, so you guys can get it right.
So here it is. All right, so a lot of you guys know, protein skimmers are part of your filtration. So what we say is that remove certain organic compounds, including proteins, amino acids found in food particles, by using their polarity. Basically, the positive and negative ions, they stick to the bubbles and rise out of the tank. Now, there are definite people who dispute that, but the basics, that's what it is. You inject a bunch of bubbles. Anybody who's got a sump or whatnot, or when you see that brown at the top of your sock, it's the same stuff. It's skimmate that's collecting at the top of your sock. That's why it gets a little darker than what's down below, because those bubbles are bringing that stuff up. Same basic principle. Stuff. That's basically what we all strive for. Some people like to bring it out dark. Some people like it light.
I dated that for years.
I think it's all a preference. I don't think it really much matters. It depends on how much maintenance you want to do. When you skim that dark, the neck of your skimmer gets gunked up really good, and you got to keep it clean to keep it performing well. So, but skimmers nowadays, you can get auto cleaning heads for them, so you can pretty much get away with a lot. So, anybody ever had this instance? When your skimmers get so gunked up, it's it's kind of funny. I always hear people talk about, oh, my skimmer, it's not doing anything, and then you show you a picture, and the skimmer looks like that. It may not have any skimmate in it, but there's gunk everywhere inside it. It's still pulling the stuff out. It's not in your water column. It's still working. You just don't have it tuned right. So
That's really dry.
So, how many of you guys are familiar with the studies of Ken Feldman? No? Okay. He did an analysis of skimming and an analysis of skimmers, which I think was flawed, but he did do an analysis of them. He basically took like 10 or 15 different skimmers and compared them against each other. He more or less, came to the conclusion that they only removed 25 to 35% of measurable TOC. That's the organic compounds in the water. He thought that was low. I kind of looked at it as I didn't want that in my water. So, it's not a big deal. However, when he analyzed the skimmate, only 25% of the solid stuff, the liquid, was actual organics. So he basically said, well, even though you're pulling this out, only 25% of it is actually organic. So you're really only pulling a quarter of what you think you're pulling. And I said, I didn't want that in my tank. Okay? And, it pulls out detritus also, which is non-organic. Little sand particles or whatnot, any of that stuff. Your skimmer is really good at pulling all that stuff out. So a lot of people quote this as a reason for not running a skimmer. I can tell you that Ken Feldman runs a skimmer. He can say all he wants about they're not that efficient. He still runs one in his tank, as does Sanjay, who did the test with him. You know, it's a critical piece of equipment. It does a little bit more than just removing, you know, those elements out of the tank. So, so when it comes to design of a skimmer, you got, this is from Randy Holmes Farley. He basically says you need a large amount of water and air interface that must be generated. The organic molecules must be allowed to collect at the air and water interface. Now, what does that mean? Your skimmer is going to produce a bunch of bubbles. All the crap's going to rise. As it gets to the top, it's going to dry out because the water is going to kind of stay at the bottom and the foam is going to continue to rise and the gunk comes out. It's pretty simple, but when it's broken down like that, it looks pretty complicated. All skimmers work the same. They produce bubbles. That's really what they do. Some people, I mean, there's different ways of doing it. Ashton can attest to the one that they had for a biz that was done by H&S. I mean, incredible amount of contact time. No one ever bought it, but it's a well-designed skimmer. I mean, it's going to get you more contact time than probably any needle wheel skimmer I've ever seen. I mean, literally the bubbles go up, they come down, and they go back up. So you got a long path of the bubble, because the longer the bubble can stay in contact and stay intact, the more proteins it can pick up along the way. The ideal time frame of a bubble's life is 2 minutes. That's kind of you want that 2-minute contact time. Of course, you know, a lot of your smaller skimmers, they're never going to do that. We just accept that. But that's always what we're shooting for. A little dark, but how many people remember air-driven skimmers?
Oh yeah.
So these were, you know, most people's first introduction to skimmers. I mean, basically it's a tube that's got an air stone in there, and you're pumping air through the air stone. It makes tiny bubbles. They collect and pump the skimmate out the top, sometimes into a collection cup. In this particular instance, there's a tube here. It basically it's hard to tell, but because of the light, but it tapers at the neck. There's no actual cup, and it just drains through this tube. So, would you say it was the main? Yeah. So, that's how, you know, I mean, back in the old days, they had these big skimmers, even in commercial facilities. Like Sanders made them. I mean, just humongous air pumps pumping all these little bubbles, you know, and they work. You don't really need a pump to feed an air stone skimmer. It just kind of takes in water from the bottom. You know, it's kind of fed with the bubbles, and they, you know, so it's continually, you know, getting fresh water from the tank. So next up, was your downdraft skimmers. You like downdraft skimmers?
I got 1 6.5 feet.
ETSS 1500 or 2500?
2800.
2800. Okay. Yeah. The downdraft skimmer was pretty interesting, and some of the best tanks I saw when I first started keeping SPS. Everyone I came across that had an awesome tank seemed to have an ETSS skimmer. They were downdrafts, basically high pressure, injecting water in this tube full of bioballs would basically break up the water and mix air into it, creating all these bubbles. And mind you, you know, it's showing you bubbles, but it's like a white cloud. I mean, there's there's not much water. I mean, it's got a whole lot of air that skimmer introduced into the water. One of the things that these were known for is significantly raising your ORP.
Wow.
Downdraft skimmers, I've still never seen a skimmer that could raise your ORP the way a downdraft skimmer could. And it's all basically, it's because of how much air it's injected into the water. It's just it's a beast. Unfortunately, they're rare here in California. And why are they rare? Because we pay a whole lot for electricity. That's it. I mean, how many people don't have a needle wheel skimmer that have a skimmer? They don't have a needle wheel skimmer.
See, it's Jerry Brown.
So, did you just say blame Jerry Brown? I'm sure our memories are. It was Ray Davis. It was like, how many governors ago? 2. So, but you have an ETSS? You said on yours?
On all my tanks, that's all I run.
Well, why didn't you raise your hand when I said don't have a needle wheel skimmer? Oh, you own a needle wheel skimmer because you got so many.
I do. I do, but I
Yeah. So, I mean, it's more commonplace here in California that you will see, you know, you won't see these type of skimmers. It's very rare anymore because they do require a hefty pump to pump the amount of water to make them efficient. So next up, because ETSS had a patent on their design, no one could really do it the same way by, you know, splashing water on bio balls. Skimmer companies looked for a new way to basically mix that air and water. This is a Beckett skimmer. This was one of the top ones back in the day. It uses a Beckett Venturi. It's a unique Venturi. It's got kind of 4 holes on it, kind of like a ball and a cross inside. It kind of just shreds up the water and gives you just a foam outlet. I believe these injectors were mainly used for ponds, weren't they?
For fountains.
For fountains? Yeah. So, you know, they just found another way of mixing air and water and still went down the exact same tube, but there's no bioballs in there, and came up. You know, most of these skimmers, same basic issue, big pump. So you don't see them very often here. You still see them across the nation and other states and so forth, but California, they're kind of dinosaurs. But they're excellent skimmers. So this is what most of us use. This is the, you know, as far as electricity goes, well, I guess the air stone pumps can also be really efficient. But a needle wheel skimmer, I mean, this is kind of what we all use for the most part here in California. You basically got your pump here. Inside there's a needle wheel with a bunch of pins on it. Shreds up the water as it's sucking in air and water through the Venturi. A lot of them nowadays have these bubble plates. They're not necessary, but you know, it's a new design. It helps reduce turbulence because the one thing you don't want in the skimmer is to have a lot of turbulence in the skimmer, because then the bubbles are colliding with each other and they break. When a bubble breaks, it just releases any proteins it's grabbed right back into the water, and the process has to start all over again. So you want bubbles to just rise without breaking. That's the big thing. That's the key to proper skimming. You know, those other skimmers with the Becketts and so forth, you know, there is a lot of turbulence here, but once it gets here, the object is just to rise to the top. So they all function the same way. Now, oops, sorry. Is that it? Okay, that is it. Okay, so a few of the things I wanted to talk about is there's some benefits of a skimmer that you know, you don't really, a lot of people don't really see. One of the major things is the effect it has on your pH in the tank. Anybody who's ever, you know, run a skimmer, if you have a controller, you turn that skimmer off, you know, for a day or so, or you take it down for cleaning, you will see a drop in pH. Skimmers introduce a lot of air to your water, you know, oxygenating the water, blowing off CO2. That's like one of those hidden factors, and the ETSS was one of those skimmers that really makes a big impact, but that's purely because of how much air it introduces to the water. How much water goes through it, how much air goes through it. It really makes a difference in keeping your pH high. Similar to other forms of filtration, like, you know, it's just doing it in a different way. You know, a lot of people are going to algae filters to maintain their pH and whatnot. Your skimmer can do it as well. Back in the old days, we used to, you know, I used to have an Aqua Sea skimmer. It had a port. You plumb your calcium reactor into the skimmer. You wouldn't drip your calcium reactor right into the tank. You pump it into the skimmer, and it just blows off the CO2, raising the pH back up. So just a little trick you can do. I mean, a lot of you guys skimmers have ozone ports. You can use that ozone port and run your calcium reactor through it. Do you really need to? Probably not. I mean, it's still gonna do it, but it's something you can do. The other thing, like we talked about with the ETSS, was raising your ORP, your water clarity. Other forms of filtration, like algae and whatnot, a lot of those can add tannins to the water, you know, kind of color your water and so forth. I mean, you can always use carbon, but a protein skimmer is going to naturally pull a lot of that stuff out of the water. Now, wholesalers have these humongous skimmers, but I don't really like to call them skimmers because all they really are giant ozone reactors. Have any of you guys used ozone in your tanks? No? Yeah, a couple of you? And what about UV sterilizers? Okay. Both of them, you know, they kill pathogens by oxidizing them. It is something that can absolutely make a skimmer more effective. It's also dangerous. I mean, you know, to be honest. But if you can apply it correctly, it can be a good tool to help, you know, kind of supercharge your protein skimmer. So definitely something to think about. There's a lot of different skimmer, you know, with needle wheel skimmers, because they've been so commonplace all over the world with rising energy prices. They're starting to, you know, trickle in everywhere now and really outdoing the other forms of skimmers. We've also got a lot of cool designs out of them. I unfortunately didn't make the slide, but how many of you guys have seen the ATI power cone? You have one?
No.
Does anybody here have one? No? Okay. It uses a little different tactic to, instead of using a needle wheel, it uses a grid wheel, which is like a, gosh, I can't even.
A mesh wheel.
Yeah, it's
What kind of
like
mesh wheel?
yeah, it's kind of like a mesh wheel, but it's like a matrix.
Yeah.
And one thing I will tell you about that skimmer is it makes the smallest bubbles I have ever seen in a skimmer. And there's no comparison to how small the bubbles are. But while doing it, it's also pulling in more air than any other skimmer. I mean, you know, that thing pulls in 3,000 liters of air per pump. You know, it only has one pump, but you know, that's a tremendous amount of air that other skimmers can't match, and it's doing it pretty strong. I mean, it does a hell of a job. So it's underrated. It was really highly touted when it first came out, and then it took 4 years to actually come to market. And by then, nobody cared anymore. But it's still a very powerful skimmer that some of you guys may want to take a look at.
The pumps go out, they can just buy the pumps and put on their skimmers. Same thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
You don't have to buy the whole skim.
Yeah, you know, the company that distributes ATI is right here in Gardena. So, you know, yeah, you can definitely, if you need a new skimmer pump, you can consider contacting them and buying one if you want to try one out.
Okay, so you're saying it's basically the fact that it's bringing so much air through whatever our venturi system is, and it's not the cone shape necessarily.
No, cone shape, no. The shape of the skimmer has nothing to do with that particular skimmer. It's that grid wheel and that venturi that's just shredding the air.
What name have they given that pump? You know, like.
It's just their power pump. It's actually, they're using a J-bow now. They used to use a Eden pump that they had converted into making it a DC pump. They weren't too reliable, so they went to a J-bow. You know, I'm not a big fan of J-bows, but they're not having any issues.
For now.
ATI is using them, ATV is using them.
Which model was it? Or all the models of ATI?
All the models, well, there's only 2 models, a 200 and a 250.
They're thinking going back to C-Chain now, because C-Chain got the DC pumps out. There's talks of that.
Oh, there's talks of that?
Who knows if it's going to happen?
Yeah.
There's talks of that. So.
Well, CJ is another one of those companies who talked about bringing out a DC pump forever. It finally came out and no one cares.
Yeah.
It's weird, you know. Like, you know, you miss your calling, you miss your calling. Now, one of the big things that I see all the time, skimmer ratings. How many people have seen some pretty wild skimmer ratings? But realistically, I mean, seriously, if you're going to look into comparing skimmers, you need to compare body size, amount of air, the height of the skimmer. Those 3 things will typically give you a ballpark of where the skimmer is. Because you can get something like a SCMAS at 60, which they say was rated for 80 gallons. And then you can get a eShops 6-inch skimmer, same exact size body, except it's like an inch shorter, same exact pump, doing the same amount of air, and they rate theirs for 300. So who's right?
They do some magic.
Sounds like good marketing.
They do some magic. Exactly. It's really weird. I mean, I know Reef used to have that same problem back in the day. They rated their skimmers for less. They were conservative on their rating. Unfortunately, it hurts their sales. It hurts these skimmer company sales when they use that conservative rating.
Because wasn't conservative on their pricing.
They weren't conservative on their pricing, no. But so when you're going to look at a skimmer, please make sure that you're looking at it and comparing the sizes of other skimmers. Don't just rely that, hey, this one is rated for 300 gallons and this one's rated for 100 gallons. I'm getting the one rated for 300 gallons. Because it may actually be smaller than and actually be less than the more appropriate one that you should have got. So those are the kind of things you guys need to keep in mind. I did help out a few companies with Skimmer Designs in the past. I kind of helped AquaSea when I was running an AquaSea because his injectors were a little too small. They were throttling down the pumps that he was recommending for him, which were all 1-inch pumps, and he had 3/4 inch injectors. I had him build me a 1-inch injector. It was like having a whole new freaking skimmer. It was insane. He eventually, changed them all to 1-inch injectors. So I worked with Warner Marine for a long time with his skimmer designs. So I've gotten it from the inside on how a lot of these things are done, and what you really want to look for. And I would, if at all you can, spend the money and do it right the first time.
What's your thought on DC pumps for Skimmers?
My thoughts on DC pumps for skimmers are, I will say from a manufacturer standpoint, it's really easy. You design for one pump and it can run all your products. Much cheaper to design that way.
But you think you'll have to ramp it up or ramp it down?
I don't see any need to. If the pump is properly sized, you don't really need to.
On a skimmer, when you design the volute, once that volute is designed for and the air intake, the way that it sucks, it's designed for a certain amount of water intake. So when you ramp it up or down, it actually defeats the whole purpose of the volute design.
That too, yeah.
So it's really funny that they're all doing that when you talk
Yeah,
about that.
I think it's a gimmick.
Yeah.
But if you have the proper, if the pump was sized right from the get-go, there's no need for a DC pump. But I can absolutely see why everyone wants to use a DC pump, because you can build several skimmers the same way.
Same pump.
And you can just adjust the pump to the number appropriate for that skimmer. For instance, the API uses the same pump on the 250 as the 200, but if you turn it up all the way on the 200, it is a cannon. It literally will shoot, it'll blow the top off. I mean, it really will, because it can't handle it. So, you know, they recommend you only run 2,000 liters an hour of air, even though the pump's capable of 3,000. So it's in all honesty, it is a favor to the company designing more than it is to the hobbyist. So also, a lot of those Chinese DC pumps are costing them $50. I mean, they're really the cost. You know, they can get them for $50 versus buying a CJ at $80, $90.
Yeah, as far as like saving wattage-wise, you don't get anything throttling it up.
Not
You would instead running the pump faster or slower, but you're like
Yeah.
saying the volute.
right.
It totally defeats the purpose. I mean, really, that air intake, what you want is when they design, whoever system designs that air intake, you want to be able to maximize the air and the water that goes in, and it actually breaks up. There's a lot of, I mean, some of the best companies, that's all they do, right?
Right.
To figure out like and once you mess with that index, it defeats the whole purpose of that loop and what you want to do with the skimmer. So.
Yeah. It's just not a necessary thing. And you know, when I'm sure some of you guys have like fed your tanks and whatnot and seen this foam head break. Nothing to worry about. It's still skimming. It's just not pouring over the cup. You know, all those organics are still there, sitting on the top of that foam head, whatever's left. And eventually, when it kicks back in, it'll pull them out. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Mark.
I've got that ATV 1200 something.
Uh-huh.
I'll get a skim made 1.5 inches in the washing cup, and that'll happen in maybe a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. I have to wash it, because if I don't keep my eye on it, it could overflow.
Yes, that is definitely.
What would cause that overflow all of a sudden, when it took 2 or 3 days, maybe longer, to get that amount, but in the next day, boom,
Yeah, that's one way that needle wheels are different from injection-based skimmers. Injection-based skimmers, when something goes haywire, they don't do anything. The foam head collapses completely. In the needle wheel skimmer, it just goes crazy and starts pumping water. And it's all in changing of the viscosity of the water. A lot of times something could be spawning in your tank. Snails,
it always seems to be
crabs.
2 inches, 1.5 inches to 2 inches.
Yeah, but
the washing cup and then move.
That just may be that
It's not
size.
like it got all the way to the top and then it happened.
Yeah. So when do you dump your skimming?
Every few days, in 2 days.
You should be dumping it at every 1.5 inches.
Just get a little drain water.
No, because if it gets a drain and it goes nuts, you'll lose a lot of water. So now there are skimming lockers that they have that actually Coral View sells one that actually your pump plugs into it, and when it fills up, it shuts down the pump. So you could go with something like that.
Mike built something like that.
Yeah, or you could actually put it in your cup. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So there's tools out there to fix those
I'm just
problems.
curious if it was some kind of design situation, because it always happens in a couple of days, everybody didn't ask.
Yeah, it's notorious with needle wheel skimmers that that's what happens. Because when they go nuts, they overflow. Any other questions? Yes. Go ahead, Ashley.
So then, based on what designs that you've done, if somebody can afford to have a taller skimmer in their tank, the taller the better.
I don't think so with needle wheels.
Okay.
And the reason why is because head pressure is the enemy of a needle wheel pump. They don't handle head pressure, which is why cone skimmers are so popular. Because of the way the cone tapers, there's less water up high, so you can build the skimmer a little taller. You'll see a lot of cone skimmers, the big ones are more like 27 inches, whereas a standard Bubble King skimmer may only be 21, 22 inches. Because it reduces the head pressure and you are able to get more air. But like the old Euro Reefs and ASMs were notorious. You get those G5s and those pumps, they were huge pumps, but they were only doing about 400 liters an hour of air because they were pumping against all that head pressure. So it's just not a good idea, which is why you saw people like Klaus with Royal Exclusive built those 16-inch diameter skimmers, but they were only 20-some inches tall. So you're still getting the same body of water, but lessening the head pressure. The dwell time, it's really hard to get to the 2 minutes with a needle wheel skimmer. Like I said, there was definitely 2 minutes in that one that they had in the booth of his. But I mean, it was what do they call those?
They're counter.
Yeah, it literally, the water goes in and it goes up and it goes back
You
down.
remember old Red Sea skimmers?
Yeah, Berlin.
The Berlin. It's like the old Red Sea
yeah.
Berlins. Yeah.
It did like multi-passes of the whole thing. Yeah. Yeah, it was like that.
Yeah.
But it actually brought it from the bottom, went up, then down, then back up. And it was a good tall skimmer.
It's a fair tall skimmer.
But it had a 200 watt pump on it.
No, that one had only that.
Was it the 100?
That was on 100. That was an injection skimmer. It wasn't a needle wheel.
Venturi?
That was a Venturi skimmer.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that was like
it was
old school. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a sure hand basically, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's a Sharan skimmer.
Yeah. So see, it wasn't even a needle wheel. So that's probably why it was doing okay with the head pressure. So yeah, I mean, there's ways around it all. So, and Jose, you had a question?
A lot of people are running airlines outside.
Yes.
Does elongating that?
People here in California may do that. I have a friend that lives in Toronto, and I told him to do that, and he's like, "Are you freaking nuts? I'll freeze my tank." But yes, elongating it will choke off the air. It's better if you use a bigger pipe to go outside, and then reduce it where it reduces at the regular length of the hose. So it can be done. Make sure you try to formulate some sort of filtration.
Air filtration?
Yeah, I mean, you never know bugs crawl in the hole. There's all kind of stuff that can happen. I mean, you gotta realize this thing is sucking air, so.
How about for the CO2 scrubbers and then kind of having to suck it through all that?
I think the CO2 scrubber is the biggest waste of money.
That's why you get one.
That's just reality. I mean, you're gonna freaking go through media so fast. And it's a money pit.
You can, what size is your skimmer?
Well, I'm just asking questions.
You can, what I've done in a lot of installs, I'll get car filter, like an air filter for a car, and then I put it outside at the base of the thing. Reduce that, bring your light in, and then you
And
can
of
always
course, it
clean
takes
that
a
filter.
mechanic and give you that kind of idea.
But I mean, and you can
But
just
that's
wash
a
it
great
and clean
idea.
it, and never gets dirty.
You know
You
it's got
clean it all
oil
the
in
time.
the filter. Can-in filter?
Yeah, that's exactly what I use.
Oh, you use can-ins? I don't know if I use that. There's oil in those, so.
Well, the oil doesn't travel through the line. Not supposed to. Depends how much you put in there.
Yeah.
And you can always, I mean, what you do is you always, with those things like, you know, plumbing, you put a loop in it, so if there's anything, it's not gonna get into your tank.
Yeah. So, yeah, here in here, I mean, on the East Coast, those guys, I mean, those CO2 scrubbers, actually pretty important. But here in California, open a window.
Yeah.
They don't have that option there. You know?
I've been using one for a couple of months now because I'm retired. I've got nothing but money, you know. Actually, it's working pretty well.
No, they work.
I would say my pH went up about 0.3, between 0.2 and 0.3. My corals, I wasn't so interested in the growth because it's growing too fast as it is already, but the color is better.
Yeah. What is your pH at now?
About 8.25 or so, and then it drops.
Oh, so you were pretty low.
I was
Running
low.
your calcium reactor hard.
Yeah, I'm not running a reactor. I'm still doing 2-part. But
You're doing 2-part. You were having low issues
Yeah.
with your. Wow, that's weird.
yeah, I dropped down to about 7.85 at night, and up to about 8.05 or so in the daytime.
Briefly, because I was like 7.7.
Yeah.
And at night it would be 7.5. And I thought about, did the CO2 scrubber for a while, and then, like you're saying, it's just like, okay, there goes $20, $20, $20.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to stay with it or not, but I honestly think that I wasn't so much interested in the coral growth as the color. And I think that the color is better, so. And I'm done with what I'm.
Are you using gate with the, in your sun?
What's that? Yeah.
Oh, you have that?
Yeah.
Do you have sufficient light on it?
Probably not.
I have a question, but do you guys have sand in your tank?
Is it like- you
Yeah.
What's wrong with sand in your tank?
No, if they don't have sand, the buffering is gonna drop, so the pH is gonna drop.
the whole box.
Then a lot of people don't realize.
He's dosing enough that his output being dropped.
No, it's talking about the pH though. It makes a huge difference. People don't realize how much it makes a difference. If you have sand and not, if you're running bare bottom, your pH is gonna drop a lot. That's
But I've got
sand.
sand.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Are we heading to the wrap? Does anybody have any issues with their aquarium that they'd like to discuss?